I'm Wanda, 65 years old, and a retired nurse who dedicated my life to caring for others and raising my daughter Amanda. Today we're at an upscale restaurant celebrating Mother's Day lunch with my daughter and her family. I had such high hopes for reconciliation despite our strained relationship. I never imagined she would stand up, raise her glass, and publicly humiliate me, or that she'd slide nursing home admission papers across the table. But she didn't know I had one last move that would change everything. If you're watching this now, I'd love to know your favorite Mother's Day memory in the comments below. Please hit that like and subscribe button while I tell you how my daughter's cruel words led to an unexpected turning point in our relationship. Thomas and I had been high school sweethearts, married young and happy, despite our modest means. When Amanda came along, she was the light of our lives. But tragedy struck when Thomas was diagnosed with aggressive cancer, when Amanda was just 8 years old. Within 6 months, I became a widow, and Amanda lost her father. The first year was the hardest. At night, after Amanda fell asleep, I would cry silently into my pillow, wondering how I would manage alone. But each morning I'd wipe away my tears, put on a brave face, and keep going for her sake. I took double shifts at Memorial Hospital, working as a nurse in the intensive care unit. The work was physically and emotionally draining, but it paid better than regular shifts. Even with the extra hours, money was always tight. I missed school plays, parent-teacher conferences, and sometimes even dinner times. Our small 2-bedroom house needed repairs I couldn't afford, and vacations were out of the question. Despite everything, Amanda was such a sweet child back then. She understood when I couldn't attend her school events because someone else's mum or dad was dying and needed my care. On my rare days off, we'd make special memories together. Sunday morning pancakes became our tradition, with Amanda gradually taking over the mixing and flipping as she grew older. "You make the best pancakes in the world, Mummy," she would say, her face smeared with maple syrup. For birthdays, I couldn't afford fancy store-bought cakes, but I'd stay up late making homemade ones, decorating them with love, if not professional skill. Amanda would always declare them perfect. She was brilliant in school, bringing home straight A's, despite the fact that I couldn't afford tutors or enrichment activities like her classmates had. I kept every report card, every certificate, every drawing she made. My little girl was going to have opportunities I never had. I was determined. The proudest moment of my life came when Amanda was accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship her senior year of high school. I still remember her jumping up and down in our kitchen, waving the acceptance letter. "Mum, I did it. I actually did it." I hugged her tight, fighting back tears. "I always knew you would, sweetheart." What Amanda didn't know then was that even with the scholarship, the remaining tuition would take every penny I had saved, plus a second mortgage on our home. But I never hesitated. This was what all those double shifts and missed holidays had been for. The change in Amanda was gradual. During her first year, she would call home regularly, telling me about her classes, her roommate, and campus life. She seemed grateful for the opportunity, if somewhat wide-eyed, at the wealth of many of her classmates. "Mum, there's a girl here whose family has a private jet. A private jet. And she talks about using it like I would talk about catching the bus." I laughed with her, but I sensed her growing awareness of our economic differences. By sophomore year, her calls became less frequent, and when we did talk, she would mention the things she couldn't afford, that her friends could spring break trips to Europe, designer clothes, the right kind of laptop. Then, in her junior year, Amanda met Bradley Harrison. He came from old money with a father who ran a successful investment firm and a mother who chaired charity galas. From the way Amanda described him, Bradley was charming, ambitious, and accustomed to the finer things in life. That Christmas was the first major crack in our relationship. We had always spent the holidays together, just the two of us, making our own traditions. But that year, Amanda called a week before Christmas. Mum Bradley's family has invited me to their chalet in Aspen for the holidays. Her voice had that excited quality I hadn't heard since her college acceptance. They have a family chef and everything. The thought of spending Christmas alone hit me hard, but I swallowed my disappointment. That sounds wonderful, honey. Will I get to meet Bradley soon? Of course, maybe when we get back. You'll love him, Mum. Everyone does. I spent that Christmas working an extra shift at the hospital, volunteering so other nurses with families could be home. I told myself Amanda was just finding her independence, that this was natural, that I should be happy she was experiencing things I could never provide. I didn't realize then that it wasn't just a holiday vacation. It was the beginning of Amanda pulling away from the life we had shared and the values I had taught her. After graduation, Amanda moved directly to New York City for a corporate job that Bradley's father had arranged for her at a prestigious firm. Our phone calls dwindled to once a month, then special occasions only. When she did call, she would speak rapidly about her busy life, her important meetings, her networking events. She rarely asked about my life or my work anymore. Sorry, Mum, I can't talk long. I'm meeting Bradley's parents for dinner at this amazing new restaurant. The waiting list is months long, but Mr. Harrison knows the owner. I tried to stay connected, sending care packages with homemade cookies and little gifts I thought she might like. But she once admitted she had given the cookies to her doorman because she was watching her calories. When Bradley proposed with a diamond ring that probably cost more than my house, Amanda called immediately, her voice breathless with excitement. I was genuinely happy for her, even as I wondered what role I would play in this new chapter of her life. The wedding was a lavish affair at the Harrison family estate in Connecticut. I wore the best dress I could afford, a navy blue number I had found on sale, and altered myself to fit properly. Amanda had sent me a credit card to buy something suitable, but my pride wouldn't let me use it. At the rehearsal dinner, I overheard Mrs. Harrison telling another guest, "Amanda's mother is a nurse, isn't that noble? We're so pleased Bradley found someone with such good values despite her background." The wedding day itself was a blur of champagne string quartets, and me feeling increasingly out of place. During the reception, I tried to mingle with the Harrison family friends, but found myself relegated to a table far from the bridal party, seated with distant relatives no one else wanted to deal with. When I finally got a moment alone with Amanda in her bridal suite, she seemed distracted, checking her appearance in the mirror. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I said, fighting back tears. "Your father would have been so proud." She glanced at me, a flash of something like irritation crossing her face. "Let's not make this a sad moment, Mum. And please don't mention Dad to Bradley's family. They'll just feel awkward not knowing what to say." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Thomas, my beloved husband, reduced to an awkward conversation topic. 5 years after the wedding, I retired at 60 due to increasing back problems from decades of lifting patients. Amanda and Bradley had twins by then, Jackson and Sophie. I was ecstatic about being a grandmother, imagining baking cookies with them, reading them stories, creating the same kind of loving memories I had tried to give Amanda. Reality proved different. Amanda had strict rules about my visits and my interaction with the children. I wasn't to bring them sweets because they followed a special organic diet. I wasn't to buy them toys without prior approval. I certainly wasn't to contradict any of Amanda and Bradley's parenting decisions. "Mum, you really need to update your parenting knowledge," Amanda would say. "Things have changed since the Stone Age." I tried to laugh off these comments, but they stung. I had been a pediatric nurse for part of my career. I knew about child development and safety. But in Amanda's eyes, my experience counted for nothing compared to the expensive parenting experts she consulted. When the twins were 7, I made the difficult decision to sell my home and move to a small apartment closer to Amanda's family in Connecticut. I left behind my friends, my community, my garden that I had tended for decades. It was a sacrifice I made willingly, hoping to be more involved in my grandchildren's lives. At first, it seemed to work. I was asked to babysit more often, which I loved. Sophie and Jackson were bright, curious children who seemed to enjoy my stories and the simple games I played with them. But I gradually realized I was being used for free childcare, while being kept at arm's length from family decisions and events. The breaking point came after I had watched the twins all weekend, while Amanda and Bradley attended a charity gala. When they returned Sunday evening, I had my overnight bag packed, expecting to stay in their guest room, as previously discussed, since it was too late to drive back to my apartment. "Oh, Mum," Amanda said, looking uncomfortable. "I forgot to mention that Bradley has some important clients coming for breakfast tomorrow. We really need the guest room prepared for them. You understand, don't you?" It was nearly 11 at night. I had been with the children for 48 hours straight. "Of course," I said, gathering my things. "I'll just drive home." "You're the best mum," Amanda said, already distracted by her phone. The children had a great time. As I drove home that night, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge what I had been denying for years. My daughter was ashamed of me. Despite everything I had sacrificed, all the love I had given, I was now an inconvenience to be managed, not family to be cherished. The Mother's Day lunch was at La Maison, the kind of restaurant where the menu doesn't list prices and the waiters wear white gloves. Amanda had texted me the invitation a week earlier, surprising me since we hadn't celebrated Mother's Day together in years. "Bradley and I want to treat you this year," she wrote. "The twins have something special planned." Hope bloomed in my chest. Maybe this was a turning point. Maybe Amanda had finally realized the importance of family. I spent hours getting ready, having my hair styled at a salon for the first time in years, and wearing a new dress I'd splurged on. I brought a special gift for Amanda too, a vintage locket that had belonged to my grandmother. Inside, I'd placed a tiny photo of Thomas on one side and baby Amanda on the other. I'd had it professionally restored, spending money I shouldn't have, but wanting to pass down this piece of family history. The lunch started pleasantly enough. The twins gave me handmade cards that warmed my heart, though I noticed they seemed rehearsed in their affection, glancing at their mother for approval after hugging me. Bradley's parents joined us, elegant as always, making small talk about their recent trip to the Maldives. I listened politely, contributing, little aware that my recent excitement about finding a sale on garden plants wouldn't exactly fit into this conversation. The appetizers had just been cleared when Amanda stood up, champagne glass in hand. My heart lifted. A toast for Mother's Day. Perhaps a moment of genuine appreciation. Her perfectly manicured hand raised the crystal flute. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, her voice carrying to nearby tables. "To the woman who fed me, raised me, and showed me exactly who I never want to be, a failure just like her." The table went silent for a split second before Bradley and his parents broke into uncomfortable laughter. The twins looked confused, glancing between their mother and me. My body went cold, as if all the blood had drained from it in an instant. I kept my face carefully neutral, a skill I'd perfected during years of nursing, when patients said hurtful things in their pain or delirium. "Darling, that's a bit harsh," Bradley's mother murmured, though she was still smiling. "Mum knows I'm just being honest," Amanda said airily. "Speaking of honesty," she reached into her designer handbag and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the white tablecloth toward me. "We've found the perfect solution for your living situation," she continued. "Since your apartment building is being converted to luxury condos, we've secured you a spot at Peaceful Pines." My hands trembling slightly, I opened the envelope to find admission papers to a nursing home. Not one of the nice retirement communities in the area, but a basic facility on the outskirts of town, the kind that accepted minimum insurance payments and had a 2-star rating online. It's all taken care of, Amanda said brightly. Bradley's cousin is on their board, so we got you bumped to the top of the waiting list. Most of your things have already been packed up. We hired a service. You went into my apartment. I finally found my voice. Without telling me. Mum, don't be difficult. This is for the best. You're getting older, and frankly, we're concerned about your ability to live independently. Remember when you couldn't figure out how to use the new coffee maker at our house? That had been once months ago, with a complicated espresso machine that even Bradley struggled to operate. But apparently that single incident now justified shipping me off to a facility 40 miles from my grandchildren. I felt tears threatening the humiliation of this public dismissal of my life, almost too much to bear. Around us, other diners were pretending not to listen, but I could see the pitying glances, the quickly averted eyes. Then something shifted inside me. A lifetime of putting others first, of swallowing hurt, to keep peace, of making myself small, so Amanda could shine, suddenly crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. I raised my own glass, my hand now perfectly steady. I looked my daughter straight in the eyes, a gaze so direct and powerful that her self-satisfied smile faltered. To the daughter who thinks this is the end of my story, I said, my voice quiet but carrying, you've forgotten that every ending is just a new beginning. Her smile disappeared completely, uncertainty flickering across her face for the first time. She didn't know I had one last move, and she had no idea how much it would change everything she thought she knew about her failure of a mother. 6 months before that fateful Mother's Day, I'd had a health scare. Nothing serious in the end, but enough to warrant some tests that my insurance didn't fully cover. I hadn't told Amanda, knowing she'd either dismiss my concerns or use them as evidence that I needed to be managed. At the doctor's office, I'd met Jasmine Lee, my doctor's daughter, who had stopped by to bring her father lunch. She was about Amanda's age, but carried herself with a warm confidence that reminded me of myself in my younger years. Mrs. Marshall, she'd said, approaching me in the waiting room. I thought that was you. You probably don't remember me, but you took care of my father after his heart surgery 15 years ago. You were so kind to our whole family. I did remember vaguely. Mr. Lee had been a quiet, dignified man whose family had visited faithfully every day during his recovery. You're in finance now, right, Doctor? Lee had mentioned his daughter's career with paternal pride during our appointment. Financial advising, yes. Jasmine smiled. Specifically working with women in their retirement years. Too many women, especially caregivers, don't realize their financial options. We exchanged numbers, and what started as a casual coffee to discuss my limited retirement funds became a friendship that would change my life. During our first official meeting, Jasmine reviewed my finances with professional thoroughness. I was embarrassed to show her my modest savings and nurse's pension, but her reaction surprised me. Mrs. Marshall, you're actually in much better shape than you realize, she said, looking up from her calculations. Your pension is solid, your house sold for a good profit despite the minimal updates, and you've been consistently saving even if in small amounts. But it never seems to be enough, I admitted, especially compared to Amanda's lifestyle. Jasmine's expression softened. Comparison is the thief of joy, Mrs. Marshall. And frankly, sustainable wealth isn't about income, it's about management. From what you've told me, your daughter makes more but saves less. Over the next few months, Jasmine introduced me to her investment group, the Silver Foxes, as they playfully called themselves. A dozen women, all over 60, all with various levels of wealth, but a shared commitment to financial independence. There was Gloria, a retired school principal who owned 3 rental properties. Maria, a widow who had turned her late husband's life insurance into a thriving portfolio. Ruth, a former secretary who lived modestly, but had quietly amassed enough to put all 5 grandchildren through college. For the first time in decades, I found myself among peers who valued my experience and wisdom. We met monthly sometimes to discuss serious investment opportunities, other times just to share a meal and stories. They became the support system I hadn't realized I was missing. Through the group, I learned about an investment opportunity that changed everything. A local developer was converting an old estate into an upscale retirement community, Silver Birch Gardens. The project needed investors, and with Jasmine's guidance, I joined several other women from the group in purchasing shares. The investment meant committing most of my available capital, a decision that terrified me initially. But the projected returns were excellent, and more importantly, investors would have priority for residency. I kept all of this secret from Amanda, partly because I doubted she'd believe I was capable of such financial decisions, and partly because I was enjoying, for the first time, having something that was completely mine. The evening after the disastrous Mother's Day lunch, I sat in my small apartment surrounded by the boxes Amanda's hired service had packed. I should have been devastated, but instead, I felt an odd sense of freedom. I picked up my phone and called Jasmine. "It happened," I said when she answered. "Amanda made her move." "The nursing home?" Jasmine asked. We'd discussed my daughter's hints about assisted living in previous conversations. "Peaceful Pines, 40 miles away. Apparently I'm checked in next Monday." "Well," Jasmine said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I guess it's time for Plan B then. Your unit at Silver Birch will be ready on Friday. The moving company I recommended is on standby. Should I give them the green light?" I looked around at the half-packed apartment, at the remnants of the life I'd lived, trying to stay close to a daughter who didn't want me except on her terms. "Yes," I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. "It's time." 2 weeks after Mother's Day, Amanda and Bradley pulled into the parking lot of Peaceful Pines nursing home, their luxury SUV looking out of place among the staff's modest vehicles. They had a few boxes of my belongings that they'd deemed appropriate for my new, cozy room, mostly clothing and a few photographs. The woman at the reception desk looked confused when they mentioned my name. "I'm sorry we don't have anyone by that name checked in." "That's impossible," Amanda said, her voice rising. "We have the paperwork right here. My mother, Wanda Marshall, was scheduled to move in last Monday." The receptionist typed on her computer, then shook her head. "We did have a reservation, but she never arrived for check-in, and we received a cancellation email the same day." Bradley put his hand on Amanda's arm. "There must be some mistake. Could we speak to the director?" 20 minutes and several increasingly panicked phone calls later, they confirmed that I had indeed never checked into the facility. Amanda tried calling my cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. My apartment manager reported that I had moved out the previous week, leaving no forwarding address except for a sealed envelope for Amanda. I wasn't there to witness their confusion turning to alarm, but Jasmine's niece worked at the facility and filled me in later. Apparently, Amanda had gone from irritated to genuinely worried, as it became clear that her carefully laid plans had fallen apart, and her elderly mother had effectively disappeared. They drove directly to my old apartment, where the manager gave Amanda the envelope I'd left. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address and the words, "If you want to know where I am, come alone at 3 p.m. tomorrow." Amanda arrived at Silver Birch Gardens precisely at 3 the next day. I watched from my window as she pulled up her face, a mixture of confusion and annoyance, as she took in the elegant entrance with its carefully landscaped gardens and fountain. This wasn't a nursing home, or even a standard retirement community. Silver Birch was designed for active independent seniors with means. The restored Victorian mansion served as a clubhouse surrounded by modern, luxurious apartments and amenities, including a pool spa and gourmet restaurant. Amanda was directed to the main building's sunroom, where I was hosting the monthly meeting of our investment group. When she entered, she stopped dead in her tracks, taking in the scene. A dozen well-dressed older women in animated conversation over tea, served in fine china with me at the head of the table. I had changed in the 3 weeks since she'd last seen me. My hair was styled in a flattering bob rather than the practical cut I'd worn for years. I wore a tailored outfit that Jasmine had helped me select. But the biggest change was in my posture, my expression, my entire demeanor. "Amanda," I said calmly, standing to greet her. "Thank you for coming. Ladies, this is my daughter. She's joining us briefly." The women nodded politely, several of them giving Amanda appraising looks. They knew my story or parts of it. "Mum," Amanda looked around in confusion. "What is this place? What's going on?" "I'll explain everything," I said. "Why don't we talk in my home? It's just across the garden." I led her to my ground floor apartment with its spacious rooms and private patio overlooking the community's central garden. The movers had done an excellent job arranging my favorite furniture and adding the new pieces I'd selected. It looked nothing like my old apartment with its faded furnishings and cramped spaces. "You live here?" Amanda couldn't keep the shock from her voice. "How can you possibly afford this?" "Please sit down," I said, indicating the comfortable seating area. "Would you like some water, tea?" "I want answers, Mum, not tea. Do you have any idea how worried we've been? You can't just disappear like that." I sat across from her, maintaining the calm I'd practiced for this moment. "Worried, or inconvenienced because your plans fell through?" Amanda had the grace to flush. "That's not fair. We were trying to help you." "Were you?" I asked quietly. "Or were you solving a problem, getting your embarrassing mother out of the way? Putting me somewhere you wouldn't have to think about me except for obligatory monthly visits?" "That's not," she began, then faltered. "Amanda," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "For years I've accepted your judgment, your dismissal, your shame about where you came from. I told myself it was my job as a mother to support you unconditionally, even when that support wasn't reciprocated. But I've realized that by allowing you to treat me as less than I wasn't helping either of us. So what, this is some kind of revenge? Making me think you'd gone missing? Not revenge. A reset. A chance for us to establish a new relationship based on mutual respect, if that's possible." I explained about Silver Birch, about my investment group, about the financial decisions I'd made. With each revelation, her expression shifted from disbelief to confusion, to the dawning realization that she had severely underestimated her simple nurse mother. "But you've always struggled with money," she said. "You remortgaged the house to pay for my college." "Actually," I said, "that's another conversation we need to have. But first, you should know that I'm not just living here. I'm a part owner. And I'm not destitute or incapable. I never was." Before she could respond, there was a commotion at the door, and suddenly Sophie and Jackson burst in, having evidently slipped away from Bradley, who was presumably waiting in the car. "Grandma," they called in unison, running to hug me. Despite Amanda's restrictions, the twins had always been naturally affectionate with me on the rare occasions we were together. "We saw you through the window," Sophie explained, her small arms wrapped around my waist. "Your house is so cool," Jackson added, already eyeing the cookie jar on the counter that I kept filled for exactly this possibility. Amanda watched this interaction with an unreadable expression. Her children, who she had tried to keep at a careful distance from my influence, gravitating naturally toward their grandmother's warmth. "Yes, help yourselves to cookies," I told the twins. "And maybe you could explore the garden for a few minutes while your mum and I finish our grown-up talk." After they raced out, cookies in hand, Amanda and I faced each other again. "You've made your point, Mum," she said stiffly. You're more capable than I gave you credit for. Is that what you wanted to hear? What I want, I said carefully, is for you to understand that our relationship can no longer be on your terms alone. I love you, Amanda. You're my only child, and nothing will ever change that. But love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, and it doesn't mean having no boundaries. She looked away, but not before I saw the hint of tears in her eyes. So, what happens now? That depends, I said. There's something else you need to know. Something I should have told you long ago about your father. What about Dad? Amanda's voice sharpened. You've barely spoken about him since I was a child. I took a deep breath. This was the conversation I'd both dreaded and knew was necessary. Your father wasn't just a construction worker, as you believe, I began. Thomas was an architectural designer, brilliant and innovative. He developed several patents for sustainable building materials before he got sick. Patents? Amanda looked skeptical. If Dad was some kind of inventor, why did we struggle so much after he died? I rose and motioned for her to follow me down the hallway to what would normally be the second bedroom of my apartment. Instead of a guest room, it was set up as an office and memorial space. The walls displayed framed patents, architectural drawings, and photographs of buildings incorporating Thomas's designs. Your father was just beginning to see success when he was diagnosed. I explained, watching Amanda take in this tangible evidence of a father she barely remembered. The first licensing agreements were signed a month before we learned about the cancer. He never saw how his work would transform sustainable architecture. Amanda moved slowly around the room, examining the drawings, the certificates, the photos of Thomas at work sites. Her fingers traced his signature on one of the patents. All these years, she murmured. I thought he was just a regular construction worker. You never told me any of this. At first, it was too painful to talk about the future he would never see, I admitted. Then, as the royalty payments started coming in, I made a decision that I believed was in your best interest. Royalty payments? Her head snapped up. What royalty payments? I explained how Thomas's innovations had gradually gained recognition in the industry, generating increasing royalties over the years. Not a fortune, but significant income that supplemented my nursing salary. Your college wasn't paid for by a second mortgage, Amanda. It was fully funded by your father's legacy. I maintained the fiction of financial struggle because I wanted you to develop your own work ethic, your own identity. I was afraid that knowing about a guaranteed inheritance might change your drive or your choices. Amanda sank into the desk chair, her face pale. So all those years I pitied you, looked down on you for your financial struggles, were based on a misconception I allowed. I finished for her. It was wrong of me to deceive you, even with good intentions. As you grew older, I should have trusted you with the truth. And the nursing home? She asked, her voice small. Were you testing me? No, I said honestly. I had no idea you were planning that until Mother's Day. But when it happened, it forced me to accelerate plans I was already making. Silver Birch was always my destination, just not quite so dramatically. Amanda looked at the photograph on the desk, a candid shot of Thomas, laughing, his arm around my shoulders, both of us young and full of hope. I don't even remember him laughing, she said softly. In my few memories, he's always serious or sick in bed. He laughed all the time. I told her, smiling at the photograph. He had this wonderful, deep laugh that seemed to come from his whole body. You used to try to climb him when he laughed, saying you wanted to ride the earthquake. For the next hour, we sat in that room, filled with her father's legacy, and I shared stories, memories, and truths that should never have been hidden. Amanda asked questions, sometimes with accusation in her voice, sometimes with genuine curiosity. Why didn't you ever remarry? She asked suddenly. All those years alone. I wasn't interested, I said simply. What Thomas and I had was rare. And then I had you, my career, my purpose. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me. I could see her processing this, perhaps comparing it to her own choices, her own marriage. Bradley was a good provider, but their relationship had always seemed more practical than passionate to my observing eyes. I've been unfair to you, she finally said, looking directly at me for perhaps the first time in years. Cruel, even, especially at that lunch. Yes, I agreed, not softening the truth. You have been, and I've enabled it by never standing up for myself, by always prioritizing your approval over my own dignity. A tear slipped down her cheek. I don't know how to fix this. Neither do I completely, I admitted. But recognizing where we've gone wrong is a start. Being honest with each other, even when it's uncomfortable, is the next step. Outside, we could hear the twins laughing as they explored the garden. Their joyful sounds provided the perfect backdrop to this painful but necessary reckoning. They should know their grandfather, Amanda said suddenly. The real him, not just the vague, he died when I was young story I've given them. It was a small olive branch, but a meaningful one. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope for our relationship. I'd like that very much, I said. There's so much of him in both of them. Jackson has his eye for design, and Sophie has his laugh. Did you ever notice that? Amanda shook her head, a fresh tear falling. I guess there's a lot I haven't noticed. 6 months after that confrontational afternoon, we gathered again for Mother's Day. This time in the community dining room at Silver Birch Gardens, where I had become something of a fixture helping organize events and welcoming new residents. The physical changes in me were evident to anyone who had known me before. My posture was straighter, my smile more frequent and genuine. I'd taken up water aerobics and Tai Chi, finding strength I didn't know my 65-year-old body still possessed. But the most significant changes were invisible. The confidence that came from financial security, the joy of genuine friendships, the peace of living authentically. Amanda had undergone her own transformation, though hers was more internal. The process hadn't been smooth. There had been defensive arguments, tearful recriminations, and periods of uncomfortable silence. But gradually, painfully, we had begun rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of truth rather than obligation. Grandma, look what I made. Sophie ran up to me holding a drawing of the Silver Birch Gardens with remarkable detail for a 10-year-old. That's beautiful, sweetheart, I said, genuinely impressed. You've captured the light through the trees perfectly. Dad says I get my artistic talent from you, she said, beaming. He said you used to draw all the time. I glanced at Bradley, surprised. He nodded slightly, acknowledging the olive branch. He too had been part of the family reckoning, admitting his role in encouraging Amanda's dismissive attitude toward me. Jackson was across the room, deep in conversation with Gloria's grandson about the model building they were constructing together. I'd introduced them after noticing Jackson's interest in architecture, another echo of the grandfather he never knew. Amanda approached, looking elegant, but notably less ostentatious than she once would have for such an occasion. The chef wants to know if we're ready for the main course, she said. Apparently you have some pull around here, Mom. The teasing tone was new part of our gradually evolving relationship. I smiled, appreciating the effort. Let's eat, I agreed. I'm starving after that Tai Chi session this morning. Over lunch, the conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years. We talked about the twins' school activities, Bradley's work, and my newest project, a scholarship fund for single parents pursuing healthcare careers that I'd established with some of my investment returns. I've been thinking, Amanda said. During dessert, about taking the twins to visit Dad's first major building project this summer, the sustainable apartment complex in Portland. It's still winning environmental awards 20 years later. He would love that, I said softly, especially if Jackson brings his sketchbook. After the meal, Amanda stood glass in hand. My heart stuttered momentarily, remembering the cruel toast from a year earlier. But her expression was different now, a vulnerability in her eyes that had been absent before. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "To my mother, who taught me more than I was willing to learn for too long, who showed me that strength isn't measured by status or wealth, but by dignity, perseverance, and the courage to start new chapters at any age." She met my eyes directly, no more evasion. "I'm still learning from you, Mum. We all are." The twins raised their water glasses enthusiastically, and even Bradley seemed genuinely moved, his arm going around Amanda's waist in support. Later, as we walked in the gardens, Amanda linked her arm through mine, a gesture of affection she hadn't offered in decades. "I keep thinking about what you said that day at the restaurant," she admitted. "About every ending being a new beginning. You were right." "It wasn't just about you," I told her. "It was about me too. I needed to end my own patterns of silent acceptance of putting everyone else's needs above my own dignity." "I'm glad you did," she said quietly, even though it was painful to face who I'd become. We walked in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the twins race ahead on the path. "Do you think we would have found our way back to each other without that dramatic confrontation?" she asked. I considered this carefully. "I don't know. Sometimes we need a shock to break entrenched patterns. But I believe love always offers the possibility of redemption if we're brave enough to do the hard work." The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the carefully tended gardens. In the distance, I could see some of my friends from the investment group walking together, their silver hair glinting in the golden light. My two worlds were merging, past and present, mother and individual, in a way I never thought possible. "Real strength isn't in hiding pain," I said as much to myself as to Amanda, "but in growing through it, in allowing ourselves to be transformed by our challenges rather than diminished by them." "You should write that down," Amanda said, squeezing my arm gently. "For your memoir." I laughed. My memoir. Who would want to read that? "I would," she said simply. "I have a lot to learn about the woman my mother really is." As we completed our circuit of the gardens and headed back toward my apartment for coffee and the homemade cookies the twins had been asking for, I felt a profound sense of peace. The bitter rejection I had faced had become improbably the catalyst for a new beginning. Not just with Amanda, but with my own sense of self-worth and purpose. Life's final chapters can be its most beautiful when written with courage and truth. That Mother's Day toast that had once devastated me had ultimately set me free, allowing me to write my own story rather than accepting the limited role others had assigned me. I wonder, have you ever experienced a painful rejection that ultimately led to positive change in your life? Please share your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and healing. Thank you for listening to my journey from heartbreak to empowerment. Remember, it's never too late to start a new chapter.